Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We were doing the sound check earlier. Something I said I love Heineken.
And I said, thank you so much for being a good customer.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love Heineken for supporting what we're doing today. In addition to that, and there's actually a synchronicity here for what you do at your company, what your company does, and what Peace One Day is trying to do today related to anti-racism. Why don't you share that with us?
Absolutely. We're an incredibly global company and present in 100 plus markets, but we have businesses in over 50 countries. We call them operating companies all over the world. So we're also 150 years old. We say born in Amsterdam, but raised by the world. And that means we have so many colleagues who speak different languages, from different religions, from different backgrounds, who are of different races and different countries of origin, different sexual orientations, genders. We have really a United Nations of colleagues, 90,000 all over the world. And that means that topics around inclusion, equity, diversity are central to us having a thriving culture. It's just the way that we need to operate together, to listen to each other, to have empathy, and to be life learners about each other, because we should be knowing of and celebrating all these points of difference. There's also a personal reason why I was really honored to be invited to join for the Peace One Day anti-racism broadcast today. And that's because before relocating to Europe 3 years ago, I was living in Atlanta, Georgia for 6 years with my family. And when I was in Atlanta, I became more proximate to the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who spent a lot of his years in Atlanta. And I was reminded living in Atlanta of the importance of not sitting on the sidelines and getting engaged. But I think more importantly than that, my personal role as a member of the majority culture, and how important it is that the majority culture is even more active than the minority culture in making sure that there is truly equality and inclusion and equity in society. And in 1963, when Dr. Martin Luther King was imprisoned in Birmingham, he wrote the famous Letters from a Birmingham Jail. And in his words, he makes a call to action to what Dr. Martin Luther King called the white moderates. It's really important that the majority culture stands up and every day does what they can do to open the doors and to create true inclusion. And I started to see my privilege and my opportunity every day, even to do little things that add up to big things, to see my responsibility in a different way through that experience. So in any case, it's really great to be here with all of you.
Bring up a lot of good points there, Stacy. And as we look at that very issue, you being so successful in various roles lately in transformation, which is a fantastic title, by the way, as well as a fantastic role in business, it has a great ability to make change. And we saw this globally during times where societies were hurting because of racism, because of the virus, because of the economy, that businesses can stand up. And you're describing something that you've done in your former job and your current job. Describe what businesses can do to help tilt us towards the let's get rid of racism successfully space. What can businesses do? They've done a lot in the last 2-3 years. I know that.
Absolutely. And it can't be incident based. It has to be systemic. It has to be every day. It has to be the way that you work. So that's what I look for when we're transforming our company. And we had a generational change in our leadership in 2020. At the same moment as the pandemic, we were reinventing our next chapter. And as part of that, we made sustainability and responsibility central to what we call evergreen, which is our strategy to renew ourselves so that we can continue to thrive. And of course, we focus on things like growth. And of course, we try to be smarter with cost. And yes, we're digitizing like everyone else, investing in culture. But we also said that sustainability and responsibility would be woven into the fabric of how we do all those things. What does it mean? We focus on 3 pillars as part of our Brew a Better World program. One is environmental. And we saw with the IPCC yesterday talking about climate change. Of course, there's tremendous urgency from an environmental perspective, whether it's climate change, whether it's use of water and water scarcity, whether it's circularity, these topics. The second pillar is social sustainability. And here, this is equal pay for equal work. This is fair and living wage all over the world. This is cultural representation and leadership so that we don't have European expats flying all over the world to run our businesses. This is local for local talent in all of our regions and all over the world. So these are the types of topics: gender representation and leadership, social sustainability. We need a healthy planet to thrive as humans and as the beautiful earth that we live on. But also we need diversity, equity, inclusion, social sustainability for all of us to be able to live together, hopefully in increasing harmony and to thrive. And then as a brewer, our third pillar is responsible consumption, which is really, really important to us as a company. So Brew a Better World encapsulates how we're trying to systemically weave into the fabric all of these ambitions that we have every single day, not something on the side, not as a one-time sponsorship, as a one-time event or one-time ambition or target or KPI, but in the fabric of our dashboards, of our performance management, of our remuneration, of the conversations we have. So when you now do a business review with our CEO and CFO, and they say, hey, are you gaining market share? Hey, how's your innovation rate? On the same dashboard, you're seeing all of these sustainability measures and ambitions embedded right next to all the financials, because it's one strategy and it's the approach we have to use every single day so that we make real systemic change. Yeah.
And you bring up a really good point. I mean, because typically these things that do affect the idea of race, you're talking about ESG, right? Environment, social, and government. Often they used to sit in the corner. It's like it's way over there, right? And what you're saying is now it's being integrated, and that integration means it's becoming core to business. You know, another thing that you've seen in your roles is that when we talk about racism, what we sometimes forget is the multiplying effect when we add gender on top. And the multiplying effect is exponential to the feeling of not being heard, of not being empowered. Now, you just take the one layer of race, but you add in the layer of gender, and that's not using a technical term here, that's a double doozy. I know in my not-for-profits work, we found that half of women of color do not find trust at work. They don't find trust at work or respect. That's twice the rate of other women. So again, you add those two layers together, something you know very well in your work in these organizations that you've been part of, because they're very progressive, small p. Talk about that idea for a moment.
Absolutely. And then you add sexual orientation, and then you add religion. And then, so these are multiplying factors. And one of the things that because it starts with it starts with what can I do every single day to contribute as a mom, as a community member, as then a business person with a platform, then a board member, and all these things. One of the things that I've tried to hone and do better in my daily life is to identify not just the macro behaviors, the inappropriate joke or the overt exclusion, but all the micro nuances. Because those things add up and can actually leave you feeling completely drained of energy when you're going through your working life. And you're thinking, hey, I was just in that meeting and someone was talking over me again, and someone wasn't listening to my ideas again, or because of my accent, or because of my mannerisms, or because of the way I dress, or because I was off on that religious holiday, or name your, I'm not being heard. And I'm putting so much energy into whatever this thing is, my job or my hobbies or whatever it is, and I don't feel the fulfillment, and I don't feel like I'm getting there, and I don't think I'm making a contribution.
Right.
We just can't afford for people to feel like that. But unless you really have your antenna up, and one of the prior speakers was talking about the fact that if you don't, I'm Jewish, for example, anti-Semitism is on the rise. If you're not coming from that community, you might not have your sensitivity dialed up to even recognize these micro behaviors, microaggressions that actually are really weighing heavily on the people who are being excluded in that moment. Yeah. And also sometimes we don't even realize the sensitivities, and we need to educate ourselves. So it is a compounding effect, and we can't afford for people to feel left out in our organizations. And that's why things like training and engaging and making it safe to have the real conversation and ask the uncomfortable questions it sounds like a check the box. Oh, great, you're going to do training, but these things really help and make a difference.
You know, when we talk about this topic, I wanted to go there, and I appreciate you reflecting on your own personal journey, because what came of your reflection just now is something that's very important to those just entering the workforce, right? The study at least that my not-for-profit did, showed that when you look at younger workers, 30 and younger, that when they are looking at businesses like Heineken, Home Depot, or what have you, they are looking at these DEI, ESG, BRG, ERG. I'm calling it these three-letter must-haves, if you will. So the three-letter gang, if you will, is super important it's important to other groups, but it is super important to the 30 and younger entering the workforce. And what can businesses do, you think, to communicate that better and do more, given that it seems like a no-brainer?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that this generation cares so much about these topics, and they basically refuse to accept anything but progress. Thank goodness, because that gives me hope that things are going to keep evolving. When I see my kids and how they behave, they're 13 and 8, they are telling us, hey, why don't we skip meat 2 days a week because it has 40% lower carbon footprint, or why don't we have more folks represented from this group or that group at our school? What is wrong with our community that folks don't feel invited to be here with us? So they're asking these questions, and they're holding my husband and I accountable, as they should. So how do we continue to change? Well, first, I hope people still vote with their feet. People vote with their wallet, they vote with their feet. So if you're not attracting this next generation of talent, you have to be asking yourself why. I think we also need to be listening and co-creating with this generation to make sure that the best efforts and the best intentions that we're putting forward are really designed in a way to serve the interest and the opportunity, and that what folks see as the actions that companies should be taking are really the things that we're prioritizing. So let's co-create this together. Let's stay in dialogue. Let's make sure we're listening to each other. I love that organizations, I think, mostly have become less bureaucratic and more flat over the last generation, because I want to be hearing from my 20-year-old interns in the hallway, when I'm working in Amsterdam, and I want them to feel safe to come up to me and say, hey, maybe this thing went well, but by the way, I don't think we did the best on this, and here's how we could do it differently. And then I love when they say, by the way, could I help with that? Could you put me on this project? Because I want to contribute. And of course, we want all of these multi-generational voices to be heard, because it's not just about race, not just about gender, it's not just about religion, it's also about generational inclusion. And in the boardroom, I want generational inclusion as much as I want all the other types of inclusion.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's so much discrimination between generations as well. In fact, most often, if you speak with, and again, the data, younger women will often identify more with being the younger as opposed to being a woman, as to what is difficult for them at work, right? Because again, the layers. You can reflect on that, but I know we're down to short amounts of time here. I wanted to ask you, how can one of the things I realized is that just because I'm a person of color does not mean I see other people of color. Just because you're a woman does not mean that you understand what it means to be across the different spaces of being a person of color either. Much less do I understand what it means to grow up and face misogyny. What's been one of your personal best practices to help to see other people?
Absolutely. Get out of your bubble. That's one of my challenges to myself the last years. Get out of your bubble and go be with different folks who you can learn to appreciate in a deeper way. Get proximate to them. That was my experience in Atlanta, was experiencing a city with also in the school system, for example, a non-majority culture. My husband and I made the decision for our children to attend public school, where you had a third American, a third Hispanic, and a third other, larger European descent, and you had non-majority communities, which was extraordinary for my kids to be
10 seconds, by the way.
Okay, so get out of your bubble and know action is too small. Every day we can all do a lot of things that add up to big things.
Stacy Tank from Heineken, Chief Transformation Officer, doing little things and a lot of big things by yourself and through Heineken. Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
great speaking with you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too.